What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb, and today we are building Teval. We're also going to do this deck tech a little bit different. We're going to talk about the commander, talk about the strategies, get right into the deck tech, and then at the end of the video, I'm just going to talk about some gross stuff this commander can do if you wanted to take him to the higher level. Kind of a spoilers season, but also deck tech video, so let's get right into it. Right after you click on that whatnot link in the description down below, you get a free $15, helps out the channel, you guys get free money, works very well. Additionally, you guys can get 20% off all of your Tolarian library proxies whenever you use code DT for D. Now, let's get right into Teval. Teval's pretty cool here. I love Sultai colors, and this guy is what I would expect a Sultai dragon to do. He attacks, we get to mill 3 cards, and then we can return a land card from those to the battlefield tapped. Additionally, whenever a card leaves our graveyard, we get to get a 2/2 zombie druid creature token. Very notable. There's a lot of different ways where this guy can just kind of go infinite and do some gross things. Not exactly what I'm trying to do today, but you can definitely take that route. Another route you can take that we're not going to do today is landfall. This guy kind of does have a landfall ability on him. Not only does he get lands from our graveyard, but additionally he says whenever a card leaves our graveyard. So if we're using cards that allow us to play lands from our graveyard and we're playing the lands from our graveyard, he kind of says create a 2/2 zombie whenever you play a land card from your graveyard. I know that's kind of like a roundabout thinking, but it's definitely something you can do, especially when you're using lands that sacrifice themselves like the fetch lands. That's going to allow us to play something like an Azusa, and now we can get up to 6 landfall triggers a turn because we get to play 3 lands and we're also sacking it, so 2 lands are entering the battlefield, and you can get a massive board state of zombies very quickly that way. Another thing this is going to give us is fodder, guys. Sultai decks love fodder, so we're going to be definitely utilizing those creatures mostly as fodder instead of just attacking. We're not going to ignore them completely because honestly, they can become lethal threats whenever we're including cards like Geralf of the Fleshright. Now we're putting a ton of 1/1 counters on our creatures, and this is kind of a deck that incentivizes you to play a lot of cards from the graveyard all at once. So whenever we're storming off, creating those zombie tokens, those zombies are just going to get massive because of Geralf. So there's some funny stuff we can do there as well. But without further ado, let's get into the deck, the route I went, and how this deck is going to play. The Teval brew I have for you today is not as disgusting as the things we're going to talk about at the end of the video, but it's still pretty powerful and it's going to do some pretty busted things once it pops off. If you've been a fan of the channel for a while, you know I'm a huge fan of just generating Rube Goldberg machines that allow me to cast my entire graveyard or library, and Teval's a perfect candidate for that. We do need a couple things for this to work. One, we need to be generating a ton of mana whenever we're casting spells from our graveyard. We need ways to recur things from our graveyard and cast them consistently, and then additionally, we need ways to draw cards. That way we're getting more cards and we kind of are able to draw our library, throw it in the graveyard, cast our graveyard, and we need a way to win the game from there because casting your entire graveyard doesn't always win you the game if you don't build the deck correctly. So some of the cards we're going to do, or some of the things we're going to do in this deck is, one, we need to make it to where our zombies are able to tap for mana. Luckily, green has a plethora of things that allows us to just give the ability to tap our creatures for mana to the creatures we control. So that's check out of the way. Another thing we can do is just straight up sacrifice them to generate mana. We have Ashnod's Altar, we have Warren Soul Trader. There's just a plethora of ways to generate mana by sacking them as well. And then we need the card advantage piece. Luckily, there's a lot of ways to draw cards whenever a zombie enters the battlefield or whenever a Kindred card enters the battlefield, right? Like Kindred Discovery here is not only going to draw us a card whenever one enters, but whenever it attacks as well. Pretty useful. And then last but not least, we need other creatures that generate cards whenever we're casting cards from our graveyard, because just generating one zombie, tapping it, and then sacrificing it is just 2 mana. That's not going to be enough here. So we're going to create copies of Teval with our clone effects, and then additionally we have other creatures in the deck like Tormod that are also going to generate zombies whenever something leaves the graveyard. And then once we get to a critical mass of these, we're generating like 3 or so zombies every time we cast anything from our graveyard, sacrificing them for 3 mana. That's enough mana from Life from the Loam. We can then use that to bring land cards into our hand. We discard the land cards to 6 to cast more cards from our graveyard, and you can kind of see where the Rube Goldberg machine kind of starts churning, and we're able to find our win cons. Before we get into the specific cards we're running in this deck, let's talk about today's video sponsors, Tolarian Library Proxies. Proxies are very good for not only building a CEDH deck without taking a mortgage out on your home, but it's an amazing placeholder for your expensive cards like the Great Henge or any card that's above $50, because there's a lot of them now. You don't want to be playing that, dinging it, so proxy it, or if you have 2 decks that want to run the same card, proxy it, put it in the other one because who wants to spend another $50 for a card you already own? Additionally, there's just a ton of secret layers that are being released that have unique cards that haven't been reprinted yet. So if you missed out on any of those secret layers, you can proxy them instead. These proxies look extremely clean and extremely realistic. So if you're looking for something that feels like a magic card but is not a magic card, proxies are perfect for you. You can also use code DT4D to get 20% off all of your proxies. Thank you to Larian Library Proxies for sponsoring this channel. I forgot, we're also mixing this in with another side strategy. I love Secret Commander, so the Scarab God is going to be the Secret Commander of this deck. One, if you generate enough zombies, this does just kill the entire table. The Scry is useful, but also we're pairing him with Seedborn Muse effects and all the other effects that allow us to tap our zombies for mana. This gets insane very quickly because you're just topping your entire board for mana, you're milling all of your opponents, and you're reanimating all of their creatures. That way, whenever we untap, not only do we deal a ton of damage to them, we just kind of untap the board and have a ton of creatures on our battlefield that our opponents are playing. And guys, our opponents play good creatures, so we have good reanimated creatures. And that's just going to tie into the strategy of one, allowing our zombies to tap for mana, milling ourselves and our opponents, and then again it's taking it's utilizing the kindred effects for our zombies as well. So I'm just in love with tying this into a Scarab God deck. The first thing we have to do is be able to cast a ton of cards from our graveyard at a mass scale. My favorite way to do this is 6 and Life from the Loam. Now in order for this to work, Life from the Loam is going to keep bringing land cards to our hand. We're going to go ahead and use 6's ability to toss them to the graveyard, and then we can use his Rechase ability to cast things from our graveyard. This also works with Slogurk here because Slogurk kind of does the same thing. We get 3 land cards in our hand, we discard the 3 land cards, now Slogurk has 3 counters on him, and we can turn him back to our hand. So 6 with Life from the Loam or Slogurk, extremely broken here, and kind of just allows us to cast all of the permanent cards in our graveyard as long as we have the mana to do so. Mudratha is also super solid here. This allows us to cast 1 permanent of each permanent type from our graveyard, so very useful and can trigger our commander a ton. She is limited to once per turn, but we can sacrifice her, reanimate her, and that is going to reset the amount of things we can cast from our graveyard using her. Another card that's especially useful for triggering our commander a ton is Chthonian Nightmare. As long as we have something like a Phyrexian Altar on the battlefield, we can easily sacrifice the zombie we generate off of our commander and the creature we reanimate to generate 2 black, which allows us to cast Chthonian Nightmare again from our hand. This is where generating additional tokens whenever the deck's doing exactly what we want it to do comes in handy. So let's talk about those cards real quick. The simplest way is using cards like Spark Double and Sakashima to just straight up create a token copy of our commander. Now we're milling and generating twice the zombies. Wilhelt kind of does the same thing here because whenever we sacrifice one of those zombies, we just get another 2/2 black zombie creature token, but now it has decayed. Additionally, Insidious Roots will work as long as we're reanimating specifically creatures. Additionally, this is just an amazing way to get a ton of mana out of nowhere. Chatterfang is also going to make an appearance. Just having extra sack fodder whenever we're generating treasure tokens is extremely broken. We are on Pitiless Plunderer and War and Soul Trader. Both of these cards will generate infinite treasure tokens with Chatterfang on the battlefield. That's not okay, but it's definitely something we're going to do. Just because we really want all 3 of these cards in the deck as their individual selves. Like, we would play Pitiless Plunderer because it's amazing, we would play War and Soul Trader because it's amazing, and we would play Chatterfang because it's amazing for this strategy. We aren't just cramming in a 2-card infinite combo. Jarolf the Fleshwright, also pretty solid here. Not only can this go and do insane things whenever we're casting things like Life from the Loam and looping 6 combos, additionally, this is just going to make our zombies massive. He does not care if we cast the zombies, he just cares that zombies enter the battlefield, and then whenever those zombies enter the battlefield, he's going to put 1/1 counters on all of our zombies. So this can get out of control very quickly, and it really makes combat damage a viable strategy here. Now that we've got the fodder, we need the mana. Insidious Roots, Enduring Vitality, Elven Chorus, Cryptolith Rites, all very good cards here. This is going to allow us to tap our zombies for mana. Our zombies don't have haste though, so how is this going to work? We're on Tyvar and Lightning Greaves, 2 sources that are going to give our creatures haste and allow allow them to tap for mana immediately. If that's not an option, we're just going to sacrifice them for mana using our Phyrexian Altar, our Ashnod's Altar, or our War and Soul Trader. And then Pitiless Plunderer is just going to sit here on the sidelines and generate a treasure token whenever anything dies, which is very useful. So now we've established our engines with Six, we've established our engines with Cthulhian Nightmare, but I want to incorporate card draw into this. So using Undead Augur and Kindred Discovery is going to be perfect. Now whenever any zombie enters the battlefield, we're going to get to draw a card, and whenever they attack, we draw a card. Additionally, Undead Augur just says whenever we sack that zombie, we get to draw a card and lose a life. This can kill you if you're not careful. Another card I want to talk about here is Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. As long as we're able to generate 4 mana whenever we cast Uro, this will allow us to go off and kind of draw into our entire deck. Let's talk about the scenarios that make this possible. We need Uro, we need Altar of Dementia. That way we're able to mill 6 cards every time we cast this guy. We need to be able to mill more than we are escaping, right? And then we need to generate 4 mana whenever we cast this guy. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but let's just say we have 2 copies of our commander, right? That makes it simple and easy. We get 2 zombies every time something's cast. Then we'll have to have something like a Pitiless Plunderer on the battlefield along with an Ashnod's Altar, or a Phyrexian Altar actually. So we sacrifice the 2 zombies for 2 blue, and then they generate 2 treasure tokens that gives us 4 mana, and then we're able to cast Uro as many times as we want, find our key pieces, and win the game. I wasn't lying when I said I like generating those Rube Goldberg machines. Now that you guys understand the main strategy, let's talk about the secondary strategy that utilizes the Scarab God along with Seedborn Muse to generate a ton of mana using our massive board state of zombies to reanimate everybody's graveyard. The first thing we're going to need to do is mill cards into our opponent's graveyard. The Wise Mothman's going to be amazing at this, along with Mindcrank. We're also going to be on Mesmeric Orb. Everybody loves to hate this card. And last but not least, we're going to be playing Altar of Dementia. The next thing we're doing intentionally is playing creatures with tap abilities that really synergize with the Seedborn Muse strategy, like Jace's Archivist. This is going to fill our graveyard and our opponent's graveyard extremely fast, allowing us to find those broken reanimation targets for our Scarab God. Additionally, we have cards like the Master Transcendent. Now while they're milling everything, we are just going to be reanimating everything. Fauna Shaman, amazing tap ability as well, just tutoring exactly what creature we need while putting a creature directly into the graveyard. Last but not least, I did want to include Agatha Soul Cauldron. This goes absolutely insane with Geralf because we're able to put a 1/1 counter on all of our zombies, and now all of our zombies have the activated ability of whatever we exiled with our Agatha Soul Cauldron. Even something like a Glen Elendra goes absolutely hard here, especially when we turn all of our zombies into counter spells because they have counters on them. It's just some really good synergy that's really free. The next thing we want to do is mill ourselves. Pretty self-explanatory. Shigeki is one of my pet cards that absolutely overperforms. Not only is he ramp, but he's consistent mill. And then if you mill something you need, he can grab it back from the graveyard. Ripples of Undeath is sneaky good in this deck because it mills 3 cards and then you can pay 1 and 3 life to put that card back into your hand. Yes, that's going to trigger our commander, allowing us to generate a zombie. Another thing that does something very similar is Burrowing Goyf. This guy's going to mill cards equal to the damage we deal, and then we can put a creature card from among those into our hand. Again, not only does that give us mill, but it also triggers our commander, which I love. Underrealm Lich is kind of expensive at 5 mana, but this guy is worth it. Now every time you would draw a card, you're just going to draw 3 cards or look at 3 cards, put 1 into your hand, and then the rest into your graveyard. So you're milling a ton with this guy, and he really does just fill the graveyard extremely fast. Another card that fills the graveyard extremely fast is Hermit Druid. No, we're not doing anything insane like including 0 basics so we mill our entire library, but we are on less basics than usual just because fetch lands are kind of good with this strategy, and then additionally, we definitely do want to mill a good portion of our library whenever we activate this guy, so just keep that in mind. Titan's Nest is also going to be super solid here. Not only is it going to be a consistent mill piece, but additionally we can exile a card from our graveyard to generate 1 generic mana. That means Exiling one card, generating one generic mana, also generates a 2/2 zombie for our commander. Out of the Tomb is absolutely insane. You can do some weird loops with Out of the Tomb once you run out of cards in your graveyard, right? You just reanimate a creature that generates a zombie. Let's say you have something like an Augur on the battlefield. You sacrifice that zombie, you get to draw another card, you can reanimate another creature. As long as you have sack outlets, you just never run out of creatures. So you can just loop creatures in and out of the graveyard as many times as you want and kind of just end up with infinite ETBs, infinite LTBs, infinite die triggers, and that's going to win us the game, especially when we're running things like the Meat Hook Massacre. Bramble Familiar is also a mill card I've grown quite fond of. Play this turn 2, it's a mana dork, and then late game it comes back to mill 7 cards and cheat stuff into play. I am on board. Another super powerful card with this strategy is Edric Sar, Master Breeder. What's going to happen here is, let's say we cast a 4 CMC creature, and we have an Ashnod's Altar or Phyrexian Arena on the battlefield. This means we get 4 Thralls. We can sacrifice those 4 Thralls to summon a 5 CMC creatures. Now you got 5 Thralls. And you can kind of see where this allows all of our creatures to kind of be free as long as we have a sack outlet on the battlefield that generates 1 mana whenever we sacrifice a creature. We could just get free creatures. It's kind of insane. Emperor of Bones is also a super solid card that I think people are just straight up sleeping on. This guy allows you to exile cards from anybody's graveyard, so we can even trigger our commander with this or just get rid of an opponent's key pieces. And then we can adapt this guy, put a 1/1 counter on him, and boom, we straight up get to put that creature onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So it's kind of like a cool reanimation piece. We do have to sacrifice it. It will get exiled, but that's what this deck is trying to do anyway, especially whenever we're getting rid of our opponent's things. There's also some really cool niche creatures we get to utilize, like Sevra. Now we're just sacrificing our black zombies and causing everybody else to sacrifice their entire board state as well. This card is just going to be super oppressive in this deck and make it to where our opponents aren't going to keep a meaningful board state on the battlefield. Ravenous Rotbelly kind of does the same thing. All we have to do is reanimate this guy, sacrifice 3 of our zombie tokens, and now our opponents have to sacrifice 3 of their creatures. Keep doing that, and again, your opponents just aren't going to have a board to play with. Now that the deck list is out of the way, let's talk about some disgusting cards I thought were way too broken to include in this deck list. We have Tortured Existence. This allows us to choose and discard a creature card and then return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. Yes, that's going to trigger our commander. So whenever you have something like a Phyrexian Altar on the battlefield, or just any way to generate 1 black mana off of a creature, you can just loop 2 creatures in and out of your hand. Nim Deathmantle, kind of similar here. If we have Nim Deathmantle and an Ashnod's Altar, this can loop any creature in and out of your graveyard, because you're generating 1 zombie off of your commander, and then you have the creature that is dying. So all you have to do is equip this to a creature, go ahead, sack the zombie, go ahead, sack the creature, and then boom, it comes back onto the battlefield with Nim Deathmantle attached to it. As long as you have a creature that deals damage whenever it enters the battlefield, or again, anything that triggers whenever a creature dies, you're just going to win the game from there. One of the most egregious ones is Gravecrawler. This is just a creature that says you can cast it from the graveyard as long as you control a zombie. So all we need is a Phyrexian Altar, or really any way to sacrifice a creature to generate 1 black mana, and then boom, we can cast Gravecrawler as many times as we want from our graveyard. This will net us infinite zombies from our commander, and again, there's no shortage of ways to win the game from there after that, including just straight up combat damage. One that I think is especially just messed up is these aren't actually only zombies. They're also druids. So we can use Guiltleaf Archdruid to tap 5 of our druid zombies and steal all of our opponent's lands. Not okay. Last but not least, we have Dire Undercurrents. This says whenever a black creature comes into play under your control, you may have target player discard a card. No, this doesn't win you the game. I just thought it was kind of messed up and probably not okay. If you guys made it to the end of this one, you guys are absolutely amazing. This was a 20-minute long video, longer than normal, but it's a new format. So let me know what you think about it in the video down below. Let me know you made it to the end, and I will be sure to leave a comment in return. Don't forget to check out those proxies. Again, you get 20% off, and let's shout out those patrons: Irrelevant, Chicken Salad, Preator, The Professional Heal, and Excessum. You guys are amazing. I hope this helped everybody in their deck building endeavors, and I will see you guys in the next one.